Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of our little podcast here. Today, we are talking to a very exciting company from the US called CoScreen. I think they have a fascinating way to look at collaboration, and Sue and I both wanted to make sure that you all are familiar with them because they're interesting from a product perspective and also from a technological perspective, and we'll try to touch on both. But first, Till and Jason, let's start with Till. Till, tell us a little bit about you all and about you specifically. What took you to where you are in a nutshell?
Yeah, nice to meet you. Good to be here. I will try not to make it too long-winded. So I'm Till, originally from Germany. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CoScreen. We've been working on CoScreen for quite some time. It was once an SAP kind of skunkworks project. Looked a little different. We thought that is really something there. I was able to take it out of SAP and work on it on the side as a hobby, more or less. That's when Jason Max, our third co-founder, and I teamed up, and we just tinkered with different ideas how you could make engineering collaboration more seamless, where the focus isn't on faces and isn't on staring at each other's video feeds, but more about the artifacts that you collaborate on, like the code, the IDEs, the dev tools that you might share. And launched in Hacker News end of 2019, the prototype, lots of interest from users as well as investors. That's when we ended up raising our seed round roughly 1.5 years ago. Put a team together. We're now a team of 8, mostly in the US, as you mentioned. I'm in Menlo Park in the Bay Area. And we have one team member in Germany. And yeah, now we launched the beta, of course, running on Jazz 6 months ago. It's exciting. Hundreds of teams of around the world use CodeScreen to pair program, debug, have interactive sprint demos. And the key thing about us is that we make any meeting collaborative. And the way this works is it's a macOS and Windows app. You can share any window on your desktop with a single click by just hovering over the window and clicking on the Share Window tab that appears above the window. When you do that, it appears for all fellow team members, and they can instantly interact with this window. So
and we're going to talk more about this. You guys brought some screenshots, didn't you?
Of course.
All right, so we're going to touch on that more absolutely in a minute. Just wanted to make sure that we go through Jason as well. So Jason, what was your journey on your way to CoScreen?
So maybe I'll start with kind of my technical journey. So I've been programming since I was 8 years old. I've always been really fascinated by technology. I started professionally. I worked on a particle physics experiment called HiRes, which is a cosmic ray observatory, writing embedded firmware. And when in that era, when we kind of did this transition from SD to HD, I got to work for a company called IBON, basically building their embedded set-top box that does high definition video. That's sort of where I first got any chops around video programming, video related programming. And from there, I went to work for a company called Sorensen Communications, where we were building basically a video conferencing solution using SIP, H.323. And, at the time it was a variation of, so Sorensen had its own variation of H.323 that they just rebranded that we used for our video codec. And so I wrote most of the low level stack for iPhone and Android when they were basically first coming out, for doing sign language communication in Relay for that company. And that's sort of where I first got into video conferencing, and actually where I first came in contact with your guys' project, the SIP communicator, which eventually turned into Jitsi. And from there, I went to work for a telehealth startup, and I got all sorts of exposure to, I wrote my own SFU, I wrote my own MCU, I worked with LiCode, I worked with all sorts of different solutions. And I think the most stable solution over the years was, Jitsi, right? It seems like you guys kind of went and built in WebRTC support and things like that. And so I've kind of, as I worked through my career, Jitsi's always kind of been there in the background a little bit. It wasn't there in the very beginning, but as far as when WebRTC started becoming out there, I started, being really aware and getting involved in Jitsi. I worked at HireView in its early stages, which was all at the time, because there was no WebRTC, it was Flash based, which was terrible. And later I actually after the telehealth startup, I went back to HireVue and helped them move a lot of their infrastructure onto Jitsi, and there was like a very poor light code implementation there and things like that. And I ended up just, I think while I was actually at the telehealth startup, I was working on CoScreen behind the scenes. So I went and found the ad that Till and Max had made, and at iBond years and years before, I had made like a system called iMedia, which was like just for hotels, right? It was on a local area network. And the idea was you could take applications from like sort of a central server. We had a big like Linux server that's sitting in a back end. And we had all these like little, 200 megahertz set top boxes, these little embedded, SMP 8632 chips, like these system on chips that were really low in memory and stuff. But this was like when, some video streamers were starting to become available, and there's people wanted to be able to get internet related video streaming and games and stuff in their room. There just was no way to do that, and so I made this application streaming platform, and it was a big product that we actually sold, because then you could go into these hotels that had all this hardware already and then like stream applications to it. And I was I always wondered, like, why isn't there such a thing for the internet? Why don't people have a way to like virtualize and stream individual applications on the internet? And so when I saw what CoScreen was doing, I thought, well, this is obviously the next logical step for video conferencing. And so I was really excited by it, and I decided to hop on it. And I think it was like 3 years of us building a prototype that we could go put on Y Combinator. Of course, I built it against Jitsi on the back end, and we got a lot of attention, and we got funding, and then I got sucked in to work full time, and then you guys very serendipitously released JAS, which was great for us, because building all of that infrastructure in the back end, I've done it before. It's a pain in the butt, and we didn't want to do it. So, and I think that's kind of where we're at today. So that's how I got here.
And why don't you guys show us now, and everyone, what is CoScreen? Because I think it is very important. That's not your typical screen sharing tool by any stretch. So I'm really anxious for our viewers to see it, and we'll try to describe it in words for those who listen.
Yeah, for those who don't see it. I myself found it fascinating. First time I used it, I was expecting something closer to screen sharing. Then I first saw the 90-second video, I think. And then I ran it, and like, oh, okay, so this is different. That popped a couple of questions I got for later. All right. So can you guys maybe walk us through a little bit of what we're seeing for those who will watch this later on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just sharing my window here. I hope this comes through Jitsi in this case. I'm just sharing it.
We're seeing it.
I'm just sharing a quick animation. It's an animation, but it's exactly how the app is, as you know. So if you run CoScreen on your Mac OS or Windows computer, you boot up, you can join the same CoScreen. It's like a Jitsi session or like a Zoom meeting. You send a link around, and everyone can just join. You can call people, and you see them on the top right of your desktop. So there's video chat built in and audio chat, but these are just features for us, just adjacent things. That is not the core of the experience. The core of the experience is what you see in the middle, which is here in this case, Mary, Jason, and Robert each share one window from the desktop. So you can see Mary shares a command prompt. If you look carefully, it's on Windows. Jason shares a Chrome window from macOS. Robert shares, I don't know what, VS Code from macOS. And the way they do this, they just move their mouse over the window to share the window. Only that is transmitted. It's not the full desktop. It's not like other remote desktop tools where you always give access to the full thing, but you only give access to specific windows, and we only allow remote control of these particular windows. And if you look carefully also, you can see that Jason is now typing into Mary's window, Robert is typing into Jason's window, scrolling, and Mary is typing into Robert's window. So it's multi-editing across multiple users. That's in its essence what CoScreen enables. Very fast screen sharing, instant, getting the window across to other folks, recreating these windows as if they were local, so you can interact with windows instantly as soon as they are shared with you, and everyone can share at the same time. And then there are some edge things like you can copy and paste between windows. I could grab now a piece from Barry's window and paste it into Robert's window, which is especially great if you're line between, designers and engineers. You might have to copy color codes, or, a junior engineer and a senior engineer. You copy code snippets between different apps, and it doesn't matter if one of us is on VS Code, another one on IntelliJ, another one on Emacs or so. Of course, it works for any app in a very agnostic way.
So like, go ahead, Emil, if you want.
Why don't I ask my first question, because I think it's important. Why do you think that's the right way to share?
I mean, I think it's the right way to share for particular circumstances, right? So like, if you really break this down, like there's several things that we're doing different than the typical meeting situation, right? So the situation we have right now is we're all videos. We're big videos. Everyone's screen is currently taken over, and they're focusing on everyone's picture, right? We know from a lot of research, especially during the pandemic, that this is something that has led to burnout and stuff. This is the Zoom hell that everyone's talking about. Everyone's stuck. They're staring at people's pictures all the time. They're getting tired from doing it, and there's like psychological reasons why that's the case. And we really built CoScreen around people who are working together, right? So CoScreen isn't that water cooler conversation. It's not for this like direct communication that you're doing all the time. And when you come at it from that perspective of, okay, these are people that are maybe sitting in this room all day and they're working together, then you start making very different product decisions about how you're going to build it, right? And those decisions are like, for instance, do you want to have to ask every single time you're sharing a window with someone? So this is a trusted collaborator. You're in there to work together. It would be like if you were in the same room with someone and they're sitting there over your shoulder and you share a window with them, right? And so having it so that you can give remote control implicitly, and then you can disable it explicitly, right? That seems, that's a time saver, right? That's something that people, if you're having to come in every time, ask, okay, I want to share this window with you. Okay, is everyone seeing it? And then somebody's asking, well, can I have access to it? And like, oh, Joe's got access to it, but not Mary, right? All of these things cost people time, right? So there's multiple reasons why when you're working together, the way you'd want to share things would be very different, right? Which led us to this very different paradigm, right? Which is people can share whatever they want whenever they want. That means you can take two pieces of content, put them next to each other and compare them, which for like, if you're doing incident response, right? Like right now with incident response, if you're using remote collaboration tools, you share a window. So let's say it's Splunk, right? Somebody else has logs open. It's like, oh, now Joe needs to share his logs. And there's no way to compare those two pieces of information together, right? Whereas if you guys, I've been in war rooms. I've been in situations where you have a DevOps team and you're all trying to maintain some sort of, or you're trying to figure out, okay, what happened with this problem? So everyone all rushes around a single laptop. Somebody else is bringing their laptop in and shoving it in out of a corner of the eye, kind of saying, hey, look at this log here. I found this line. And CoScreen kind of lets you do those sorts of things remotely, because now you can just, without even asking, okay, here's the log, here's the Splunk. You can move the windows, look at them next to each other. You can move your mouse over the sections of the log that you're talking about, and you get that context of what they're talking about. So this remote work that we're all being forced into, right? It just turns out that a lot of what we were doing in terms of collaborating, like originally we were thinking of CoScreen just in the office, right? To save people the time of walking down the hall to like look over your shoulder to see what's going on your screen. So you could just throw your window up whenever you want to, right? And it turns out that remote collaboration solution is very useful for people who are actually trying to get work done today, So like this pain of all of the inflection points and all of the, things that are very reasonable if you're doing a conference of some kind, or you're doing a meeting like what we're doing right now, right? You want to have the administration tools turned inward because you have a single point of control in a meeting like that. But in terms of when people are working together, usually it's much more ad hoc than that. And CoScreen facilitates that method of collaboration.
Right. Okay. Well, when people talk about startups, and I think business schools like to take that approach a lot. They often try to frame a new product in this manner of speaking, like comparing it to a reference offer, and specifically the reference offer is, this problem that you're solving right now, before you existed, what was coming closest to that? To what would be your, like, the people who don't have CoScreen, what would you say is the closest to that experience that they do today?
It's hard to say, because I think if you think about it, the way you share windows in Jitsi or in Zoom or in Meet is the same way you did this in 1996 with a net meeting. It's the
Well,
same.
not necessarily. It doesn't have to be necessarily on meetings. For example, Jason talked about war rooms.
Right.
And I'm thinking the typical war room in an office was, well, just everyone screams and actually grabs an actual room, and then everyone goes in there.
Right, then you juggle HDMI cables, right? Then you juggle,
Right.
okay, can you please pass me the...
Yeah. So would you say that this is like, a decent reference for, this is what CoScreen is trying to make better, for example? That's one scenario where you're juggling cables. Maybe you're not even in the same room, right?
Right.
That's a big deal.
That's the interesting thing. We do think we add a layer, no matter if you're remote or in person, because we can do something on CoScreen that you can't do in any other tool, no matter if you're in person or if you're remote.
Right.
The fact that you can share from 3 people, windows from 3 people on the same joint workspace does not exist today. You have some tools where you can share multiple desktops from different people, but they appear in different black boxes, and they're not kind of conjoined on the same workspace, and you can't interact with them. So there is no tool that merges the experience of multiple team members in one. There's always this handoff where you say, okay, no, it's your turn. I unshare, you share, or
Would you say that 2 people sitting in front of the same computer is the same use case, except that
it's a use case that we cover, right? It's a use case that we cover, but we cover it better, right? Because we might be more like 2 people sitting in front of the same screen, but they have 2 mice and 2 keyboards, right? For the same
I like
screen.
that.
And that's, we have a solution that can deal with like what people might use a KVM switch for, right? Or what they might be juggling around HDMI cables for, or, like for me, like what I'm using, we use CoScreen every day. We're using CoScreen to develop CoScreen. And whenever I'm interacting with another engineer, right, it's a lot like to be honest, the biggest inflection point is that whole, if I were in the office with my coworkers, it would be that tapping them on the shoulder and like, hey, take a look at this. And then, oh, what are you working on? And watching them in their IDE go through like some block of code and explain it, right? And then I show them, some place in the code that I'm working on and explain it, or take them to a portal where we're, AWS or something, and show them like where I'm registering a server. And so it's like we're doing a lot of those moments that would be this in-office work collaboration, but using CoScreen, right? So it's like CoScreen is kind of this, it is a collaboration tool. It's how we bill it, right? It is a tool for facilitating collaboration like people would collaborate in the office. And in some ways it's worse than that, and in some ways it's better than that, right? Like there are
How is it
upsides
worse
and
than
downsides. I don't, the way I feel is like, remote communication is never going to be as good as in-person communication.
Right.
Like I'm having this conversation with you, but there's always this kind of layer of, where you have that human physical connection. So like CoScreen's never going to replace that, right? But in terms of like, do I have to go hunch over my friend, or my coworker's keyboard, and he happens to have, I use this, this Advantage 2, and I have a very different keyboard layout, and I can't figure out his keyboard layout and stuff, and I can't really use his window, or I can't work on anything that's on his computer, right? Like it's obviously much better in terms of that, right? So there's, I think we all know that there's trade-offs to remote work, and it's, I'm sure I can make a huge list of advantages and disadvantages, like everyone can now, because everyone's been working remotely for some time. But I think that in terms of like actually offering that, ability to just ad hoc, share something like you can in reality, CoScreen does that better than in person, right? So
after you guys have gone public beta, because from what you say, it sounds to me that it could definitely help developers, because we mentioned this use case for sharing code, editors, war rooms, logs. Would you say, or are you willing to share this with us, that development or like DevOps kind of scenarios are like the main use case you guys see, or have you been surprised by some other ways in which CoScreen has been used by other
I mean,
people in maybe other completely different areas that have nothing to do with software development, for instance?
I'll let Till answer this. Actually, I think he.
No. I mean, I would say 90% of our users are engineers. That is true. It's just the wedge into orgs. It is the bridgehead of, how you land first. It's individual engineers often that find ourselves. Many of them are pair programmers that write code always together. Many of them only write code that way. It's not just like a thing they use here and there, but they write every single line of code together. And by that mean, avoid code reviews and do some other things that they think are as advantageous compared to writing software synchronously. We do also have a lot of people that use CoScreen for mentoring and onboarding, where you have a senior engineer and junior engineer. Senior engineers online all the time, kind of office hours. Junior engineers can just drop in, share where they struggle. The senior engineer shares, what the solution is, and they align very quickly. So it's all these use cases that Jason mentioned earlier. We do see, and that's the exciting part, lots of use cases that we haven't thought about. We always knew that CoScreen is useful for 1,000 different things in many, most likely millions of teams around the world. But now it's emerging. Now that we're out there and more folks hear about us, you can hear about use cases like ops teams as B2C companies, right? We talk to early team members at Uber Eats and DoorDash and so on, where these ops teams work constantly in firefighting mode, always hack together solutions to be more productive, to scale up quickly. Competition is stiff, and they think this could be a game changer for them because they can just be all on the same page all the time. All hands on deck. One can share the latest list of whatever restaurants to go after. Another one can just share the latest outreach, and there's no more debating of, hey, can you do this link? No, go page back. Can you go to Slack? I just sent you something. Open this link. No, the other one, and so on. It's like it's extremely painful, and you only notice that once you see there's a better way of doing this. And we heard from architects, from CAD users, 3D production tools in Hollywood, where there isn't just a Figma. I mean, some of you might know that Figma is now the kind of standard design tool. It's collaborative by default. It is multi-mouse pointer in-browser collaboration. And we are saying we provide that experience for any application, no matter if it is browser-based or desktop-based. And that means it's also useful for many other use cases, but engineers.
So incident response. Oh, sorry. Incident response is actually a really small number of our users. I just wanted to put that out there. Like we have had users that have gotten CoScreen and approached us and used it for specifically that purpose. That's mostly like what we're using it for internally, right? Is incident response, mentoring, onboarding. And, I think the most surprising use case that I've seen is like, we had someone like make this really cool video for accounting tools, right? And it makes a lot of sense. So apparently like some group of accountants found us and are using us for sharing like Excel and like going through and like, doing a lot of the stuff that they used to collaborate on in office, right? My wife is a accountant, right? And so like I've seen her, I've been into her office while she was, doing close and stuff, and I saw like just all of the madness like around that period of time for she worked at a tech startup, and they were up like staying up till midnight, right, trying to get close done and trying to reconcile these huge lists of transactions and such. And I think it was a really cool use case, right? Because like a lot of these companies tend to have very like legacy tools. They're not using like the most cutting edge things. At Goldman Sachs, she had like some bizarre like terminal mainframe thing she had to log into, and it's like, how do you even share that these days? But like with CoScreen, they could just like share their window and stuff. So it's definitely not a huge use case. Most of our users are developers, but I could definitely see utility in other areas. It's not how we're marketing it. They're not our target customers, but
right.
That is there.
I was thinking that I have used other tools in the past to, for instance, help a relative, help my brother, help my father fix a problem, like requiring this remote control for almost anything is a thing that you need to have. And I think the last one I've used was like TeamViewer or something. But I don't know if it does now, but it didn't, it doesn't have this video thing. So then we need to actually have a phone call going on in parallel. So I can definitely see the appeal in having it, a bit more integrated. And going to follow my own tangent on integration and ask like, so right now, CoScreen is this, of course, it's a standalone application, but you I mean, in my mind, you need to get into CoScreen from somewhere. Like you're already chatting in Slack, or you are in some other business or personal communication means, and you then escalate into this kind of session. So, do you see yourselves going into like maybe deeper integration with like an IDE, for example, built right into Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ, something like that? Or
We have a plugin for VS Code, and we're doing a lot of work on integrations for that same reason, right? And we have a Slack integration where we recently released into SetApp. So people that are using like the Teams product from SetApp, that they already have it for their business, they can all use CoScreen. But I think integrations is a big part of our strategy. I don't think we don't want to be Slack. We don't want to, like, in some ways, like if you look at our user interface, it would be very natural for us to go back to that old kind of Skype or ICQ or whatever style, like Jabber client with a list of people, and you double click on them, and maybe you go into a CoScreen with them and stuff. And, we have a calling mechanism, but we've been very resistant to trying to be a chat tool or trying to be a tool for doing this sort of asynchronous communication. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe we should just go with the flow. But I appreciate you guys saying that, because like I think, people want to use Slack and they want to use the tools that they already have for accomplishing that. And like there's been very few tools that I've seen that have done a good job at that. So like for us, it would just be a distraction to our engineering effort. And so like we are really focusing. It's very much.
I think the problem that Sue is getting at is that, and we see that, as part of Jitsi as a service, we work with many companies that have interesting concepts. And really what becomes apparent very clearly is that from a product perspective, the most complicated issue with meetings is that, how do you get people to come? And that's, meetings are supposed to be a rendezvous point thing, right? Contrary to phone calls. But fair enough, great. But then someone needs to advertise the rendezvous, and then you have all the problems. Well, is it going to be now? And if that's the case, is everyone available? Is it going to be later? And if that's the case, how are we going to handle scheduling? And it always becomes people routinely underestimate the complexity of this problem. Is that something that you've seen as well? That getting people to meet isn't actually a trivial issue?
I mean, we keep a lot of these statistics ourselves, right? And like if you look at our usership, it's like this hockey stick, right? We have a ton of people that are signing up, and we know if we can get people to come in and like do like 3 or 4 sessions that are above a certain period of time, then their retention level is very, very high, right? And that part of our funnel, right, is a very contentious one, right? Because we get all these signups, and we're like, how do we get these people to like come in this period of time so that then we retain them, right? And you're right,
but it's not only your problem
to solve.
It's also the problem of the people who are using it. Okay, I'm in, great, that's no use to me. I need to get other people to join as well. How do I do that?
So we like tried providing a list where they can invite coworkers, and you like once you can get that team on, then the teams tend to stick, right? But you're right. Like getting the team on is a difficult problem. So,
and it's difficult to get them on the tool, but it's also difficult to get them within a meeting
session,
within the session.
And also to adopt a new workflow, right? What we do is different, and I think that is a challenge that we've seen, right? There are folks like I would say process nerds like us, productivity nerds that enjoy the new way of doing things, and they can ideate about what cool things they could do on CoScreen. But there are also many folks that just can't see that just yet, and they have to be convinced, and you have to guide them through the process. So we actually launched a new onboarding process where the first time you join the CoScreen, there's a bot that joins you if you're alone. So it's in that case smart. If there's no other person, then it forces a bot upon you that collaborates with you. She asks you to share a window, interacts with you, plays tic-tac-toe with you, so you get the whole experience even if you're alone. Because we know based on our own stats that the far majority of users either connect alone or are at least alone for the first 2 minutes because they never join at the same moment. And now we're using that time to teach them how CoScreen works. So as soon as the second team member joins, they have learned how the tool works. They got how it's different. And, you can see how activation goes up. And that's something we will continue to invest to, smoothen the on-ramp. Integrations are one piece, is kind of distribution and awareness. Then once they're in a session, teaching them how to use that, getting them inspired about what else they could do with this, and then of course getting them back through different means. And these are now kind of the day 2 problems after we built the foundation over the first 1.5 years.
I mean, another. Oh,
I think that bot was. Let me touch on the bots 1 second here. I think that bot is great. Actually, used it today. She lost at tic-tac-toe. Why didn't she start in the center? I don't get it. Anyway,
You don't need to start on the center to win tic-tac-toe.
Usually, I think.
In fact, once you know tic-tac-toe, you can never lose. You know, if you play against
we made
someone
it.
else,
We made it so the bot always lost originally, and then our QA person complained about that, and so we made it make it so the bot mostly loses. But we could also make it so the bot like almost never loses unless you have the perfect strategy. So,
we should have a separate podcast session explicitly talking about the the emotional preservation of the bot. That's
dumping down AIs. So I was thinking when I had the bot, one of a use case that I don't know if it crossed your mind or not, but it did mine, which is so I work on the Jitsi mobile apps, which means basically that means you need to work on macOS because it's the only platform that allows you to use Xcode. But I wonder if there was a way for me to join a CoScreen on a headless Mac and remote control at Xcode to do the builds for me while I'm typing on Windows.
We use it this way sometimes. It's not really how we designed it, right? It's kind of more like what TeamViewer is doing and stuff. We've had a lot of people talk about that, and like, I mean, it's definitely possible. You just, I have a Mac Mini. I leave CoScreen running on it. People join into the session. I have the desktop always sharing, and it works that way, right? We don't really have any features that we've built to make it persistently restart like what TeamViewer has or things like that, because it hasn't really been our core use case. But I think with a few product features, it's definitely something we could support.
Yeah, it's interesting that you have used it that way as well, because that didn't cross my mind. And like, as you're using multiple operating systems, and it's like, if only I could just quickly without opening.
And maybe just to add, it was funny going back to use cases. There's a researcher that I think works in the lab with lasers out of nowhere. It's a big installation of like a big range of different devices, very complex, very expensive, 4 different computers along that test bench. And then he installs CoScreen on all these 4 devices. And on the central computer, he just gets one window from each computer, and he sees the whole setup at a glance. That wasn't something we built, but it's true that this is now possible right now. And you would have had to find other ways to kind of share 4 desktops at the same time and kind of squeeze them together on this 5th computer to see what the hell is going on. But now you can just say, okay, this window from this computer, this window from this computer. You arrange them, and you can see instantly, okay, what are the signals at each of these steps of his lab setup. And that was interesting, and I think there's more and more like that we hear about.
I think so. Just going to like some of the struggles with retention and stuff. I think one of the big things is I think in terms of like what we have to accomplish, latency is a really big deal for us, because our tool is very much, it's not just the quality of the stream that's coming through, but it's also like how much latency is there, right? Because the illusion gets destroyed very quickly if there's any typing latency, if there's, and it's like, even if you just get down to the, we'll have people that have just a poor experience, and you go look at like, what's the RTT for their connection, and it'll, 200 milliseconds or something, right? And you'll just be like, okay, you guys aren't going to have a very good time with that, because your base RTT is quite high, right? And then also like, all the same struggles I've had with other places with just general video conferencing, packet loss, and people that are too far from their Wi-Fi and all these other things, and it's like, I think we're trying to build a good support and triage process for dealing with that. But like, if you go look at like Stadia's docs, right, they're like, basically you have to have 10 megabits up and down, you have to have this latency, and they're like very draconian about their network requirements. We've built CoScreen to have much lower requirements in terms of like what network requirements are there. And I think we've done a pretty good job at it in terms of like what we provide, but like it's definitely going to be a long-term struggle for our product, like working on how do we deal with that, how do we how do we educate customers about it? We're also like starting to get like tons of inbound traffic from banks, and like I worked at a company called BVS Performance Solutions that I built a video conferencing product for them. All of our clients were banks, and it was a huge struggle because they just have these absolutely draconian, horrible firewalls that do all sorts of janky things that, like, we had to basically make extremely small sets of endpoints for them to whitelist and connect to and all this stuff. It was a big pain, and it's, I think, I'm trying, I think that was our strategy, right? Was to try to like keep it simple, stupid, but it's probably more like we need to get better at understanding like what is it that their security people actually want in terms of these things, but I think that's like in terms of growing pains, that's a big part of it right now.
So you're muted.
I was muted.
Oopsie.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I was sorry.
Okay.
So you did mention that you guys have also, struggled with networking stuff, and you did touch a bit on what you've built. I was wondering, we can dive a little bit into the tech side of things. So you did mention that you guys are using Jazz or Jitsi for the video conferencing side of it. But then, so I'm going to throw you like a random bunch of questions that popped in my head while I was using it. It does feel like Electron, but is it? All of it?
Not the majority of the actual streaming stuff is done natively, and it's mostly written in C++. And we actually have libwebRTC and a wrapper, and we take the Electron windows and we grab the hwind on Windows, we grab a handle to the window, and we inject an OpenGL surface on Mac, and we inject a direct 3D surface on Windows, and we render all of our content directly into the window. And we do all of our slicing and stream composition there. We use C++ for insertable streams for putting in our window coordinates and a lot of this information.
API. Nice.
Yeah, it's not actually like, it's not really an insertable streams API that, Chrome, that was a big thing that they, I hate that they do this with libwebRTC, where they, they have like a WebRTC API, like insertable streams, and then they go and basically put the actual implementation of the API into Chromium. And so it's not even there. So they have basically like a very rudimentary insertable streams API. I actually might write a blog post on it because there were quite a few people that wanted to do that with the C++ API. And it's very different than the standard insertable streams API. But yeah, for performance reasons, I hate to hear you say it feels like Electron, because we've done a lot of work to try to make it not feel like Electron.
No,
but
don't get me wrong. I meant from the perspective of, we provide a JavaScript API for Jitsi/Jazz. So I was thinking, at least this window where I can see myself, this is most likely an Electron, but the rest definitely doesn't feel like Electron.
Yep.
I meant more like because I've seen these kinds of applications that they use Electron for a little bit of the stuff, and then they venture onto other things.
I think our theory was that would like save us a lot of time in terms of like UI development and such. But I think our UI is very minimalistic.
It's very minimal.
Maybe we would have made a very different decision and done Flutter or done something different had we approached it today. I would Qt or something like the truth is that Electron's actually been somewhat painful. There's a lot of things about Electron that I really don't like, and there's a lot of things I really do like too. But like like the amount of engineering resources that have gone into debugging, IPC hangup issues and like asynchronous tasks getting backed up and causing everything to back up, or because somebody went and added some sync call that waits a long time somewhere. It's a lot of overhead that on problems that are really very Electron specific, so.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, I'm on the camp of, I'd rather have it Electron based than not have it at all, which is the case very often. So
yeah,
there you go. When you mentioned Stadia and their draconian requirements, the thing that comes to mind when I think of Stadia is that they were very they're very strict on. They were thinking a lot about the codec they use because of the quality that they get back. In a video game, you cannot really tolerate the blurriness, and we have battled with blurriness ourselves in screen sharing.
Right.
I don't know if you have any stories to share about codecs that you guys have tried, used, discarded.
I mean, we tried using H.264 multiple times, but there's incompatibilities with the video bridge that I think we quickly learned that trying to swim upstream there was a bad idea. In the past for these types of things, like I mean, one of our I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Screen Hero, right? Screen Hero, they ended up using like libx264 and doing a lot of optimization down on the low level for trying to reduce latency and stuff. In my opinion, VP8 is not very great at doing this. I think they've gotten a lot better in terms of like low latency and such. There was a period of time where it was very hard to tweak things. There's certainly a lot less knobs and levers to pull in VP8 than there are in H.264. The blurriness issue, the fact that like if you're quickly changing scenes and such, it seems like VP8 definitely gets does degrade the general quality of the stream more abruptly than H.264. But like we're in a way, like we've not been super focused on the codec. I'm hoping. I mean, it seems like Stadia, like Emil and I in our last conversation, right? It looked like they had very different strategies where sometimes they would use H.264 depending on the resolution, but they're mostly using VP9, and it seems like they put a whole lot of work into that. And I don't know the inner workings of Stadia, but I'm assuming they have some kind of content aware encoding that they're doing and other magic that's happening on the back end that's helping them to do such. I mean, they do obviously a very, very good job at providing high frame rate content, low latency. And I know there's like I think it's Proton or something, right? There's other companies that are building that, but like I'd love to be super focused on the codec. We've done a bunch of things to try to tweak VP8 as well as we can. We did a bunch of work with H.264, but we haven't released it because of there's a lot of complexity behind it in terms of like our infrastructure and everything. I think so like so far, like we're trying not to swim upstream. We're trying to do the best we can with VP8, and we have a host of tweaks that we've made in libwebRTC in order to try to produce better lower latency, and to we still have blurring when the scene changes are very rapid and stuff, but we've done some tweaks to try to improve that. I'm not sure if we're doing as good as like for instance Screen Hero was doing with libx264. That's definitely something I want to do at some point, but I think the VP9 support that you guys are having in the bridge and stuff, like I think that if we're going to be working in the future, we'll try to make use of that as much as possible. But I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, it's still not super detailed. There's definitely been an odyssey of a journey behind some of that.
No,
behind the
it
scenes.
does, because I was wondering, indeed, it's like, what have you tried? It looked, because I also saw that post that you guys have on the DPI adjusting,
right?
Because I was thinking, indeed, like, okay, so this is a 4K screen that I'm looking at right now. And then I got the Mac on a different scaling setting. That's going to be a mess. And it seems to work fine. So great job, guys.
Yeah, and that's actually like part of our secret sauce, right? Is this whole, I mean, that's one of the things you can do with CoScreen that nobody else can do, right? Which is that we actually consider the native resolution of the windows, and we try to preserve that ratio. And we have an algorithm for actually determining, okay, this screen is just way too small to actually preserve that ratio. But you can always scale it. You can scale it to that same ratio eventually. And we've kind of come up with a compromise of how we end up showing those windows originally to try to make them look the best. And some screens, like if somebody's coming from a huge 4K screen and they're coming to a really low resolution screen, it's just going to show up tiny, but then you can scale it to where it looks good for you. And I think it's a pretty good compromise that we've made so far. Our original paradigm was like all of the windows I'd actually like track and stay together. And when the remote person moved, it would move. And then everyone had this kind of shared desktop. We moved away from that to individual windows. And in the future, we'll probably move into actually like composing the contents of the windows in the stream totally independent of each other and independent of the remote position. And I think that gives us a lot of leeway in terms of like, we could actually like, if the window's in the background and it's obscured, we could scale it down a lot. So we're not sending as much data there. So we help preserve some of their bandwidth and things like that. There's a lot of leeway in terms of how we send windows based on the actual context of them being used that isn't really available in a standard screen sharing scenario in order to try to make it look better to the end user, so that's kind of exciting. There are some things with like the on stage features of the video bridge and things like that, which, like if that gets more sophisticated, it would be really helpful to us, because then we could like be very specific about like, don't ever stop this window from being streamed, right? But these windows, I'm okay with you, for bitrate control and such, for you to actually start dropping frames from these windows or whatever, right? Like the more granular controls we would get there eventually would give us a lot more tools to be able to really customize CoScreen in a way. I get that it's not really the core focus of Jitsi, right? It's maybe not even super helpful to Jitsi, and the tools that are there already, actually, we've made good use of it, because like the paradigm we're using right now is whoever the current focused user is the on-stage user and stuff. It actually is a paradigm that works pretty well for what we're doing mostly, while allowing congestion control and stuff to work on the bridge. But like giving us more levers to tweak there would be really great.
I think we have some new levers that we landed lately for our support for 500 participants,
Right.
because you can select different endpoints, but for each of them you can pass the minimum height. So
Interesting.
that would be the resolution, and we're probably going to work on different layouts where you have more than one participant on the stage, quote unquote.
Right. I think that would probably be the most useful thing.
So I mean, it may not
side by side scenario.
Yeah. So it may not be like on stage times 2, but the result would be very similar to that. Combination between pin participants and selected endpoints and constraints on the received, bandwidth for the both. But it's very cool to see that you guys are using this on the lowest possible level.
Yeah.
Because you're using libjitsi Meet, right?
Yeah. So we integrate directly with libjitsi Meet, and there have definitely been I think actually like libjitsi Meet has been very, very stable, and we keep it up to date pretty well, and there aren't like a whole lot of changes there. Mostly when we've had any issues, it's been due to a change in the infrastructure, and usually us just being unaware of some of the consequences of those changes. And so I think we've done a lot of work to try to like we have like an environment. So we have our own Jitsi environment, right? We have a server that's on our last stable version. We have a server that's on the most current version. We test against the most current version, and then try to detect any breaking changes before they end up going into production, which there tends to be a pretty long runway before that happens. And then if something does happen, then we try to bisect to find between the two servers to find like where did this happen, go and think about it and come up with a solution. And so far that's worked pretty well. When something does go south, it's a pretty harrowing thing, especially if it's in production and we're just like up all night and stuff. It's definitely not the funnest thing in the world to do. So we're really trying to make that work happen before it gets there, because the more we can do that, the more we can actually like space out the engineering effort that's required to reconcile those sorts of problems.
We're nearly at the end of our time. This has been absolutely fascinating. I did have one question. I don't know that it's a quick question, but I'm curious to ask it. So I'll ask you, Till. As a part of this process, you came from Germany to the US, and I'd like to hear why. Was that just Was that just circumstances? Do you think CoScreen would have been possible in Europe? Is the location pretty much insignificant? Does it matter that you're here?
It's an interesting question. I think it for sure could have happened technically. If you might know the TeamViewer and AnyDesk, both remote desktop tools, the most popular ones, as far as I know, are based in Germany, are built by German teams in Germany. So there's nothing against, there are great talents over there. The journey that I think is that was ours wouldn't have been possible like that. It's more, in hindsight, everything makes sense. But the way we came here, I didn't come here to build a startup. I came here because we found an exciting position. My wife and I decided we didn't want to go back to Germany. We were in Switzerland at the time and rather spend some time in the US, at least a couple of years. Came here, worked on exciting projects, met some entrepreneurs and other folks that built great stuff, and then became more and more interested in building something on my own. And that's how it happened. And of course, we have a very, very unique story with an SAP project.
Right. But so do you think there was something that happened here, something good that happened here, that was less likely to happen in Germany? Something specific to US culture and
I
environment?
do think so. Especially in the West Coast, the spirit is different, right? Folks, it's not always this thing about, folks are excited about failure here or value failure in Silicon Valley. I don't know if that's the thing. It's just more common that you do crazy things and that you do leave very cushy, cozy jobs. They call it the gravy train here. I worked for Google for a while, had a great job, enjoyed my life. At the same time, it was obvious for me I wouldn't stay for much longer because I want to build something on my own with a tiny team, just like Jason and I have done it over the past 2 years now. And that's something that is very uncommon in Germany, unfortunately. And I think in Europe overall, it's catching up. Berlin is a great hotspot for startups, but it's still way too rare. There are way too few folks that build try things, and that's truly unique to the area, and hopefully it's changing globally.
And that's culture essentially, right? And it includes developers, it includes the entrepreneurs, it includes the investors as well.
Right. Right. Of course, now you can raise from anywhere on Zoom and so on, but the truth is we've raised from a VC that is literally 600 feet away from where I am right now. There is a benefit of being in the space and being able to meet up and have some connections, joint connections, and if you think about it, after we've raised and talked to investors many times over, you can see it's a very small ecosystem. It's not truly global. Of course, they're global investors, and of course, it's possible to raise outside. Yeah. It's just much harder to build a really, really strong business and raise a lot of money to build a really strong business compared to if you're just here.
Thanks for sharing your experience. And I think this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you guys for coming over, and good luck to you with this absolutely awesome tool.
It was great, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for inviting us.
Have a good one.
See you guys.